In 2020, leaders in every industry, including healthcare, have been trying to adjust their strategies despite uncertainty about the future. Given the current ambiguity affecting life science organizations and their healthcare customers, we reached out to Dr. Anthony Slonim, President and CEO of Renown Health. We asked Dr. Slonim for ideas on how learning leaders can feel confident in their decision making and prepare their sales teams for whatever comes next in 2021. Dr. Slonim may be a familiar face to you. He has led Nevada's only locally owned, not-for-profit integrated health system since 2014. Last year, he was named one of the 50 most influential clinical executives by Modern Healthcare. He is also chairman of CMR Institute's board of directors. Dr. Slonim, what will happen to hospitals and to physician practices if the ACA is ultimately struck down?
If the ACA is struck down in total, that will affect several things, right? One of them is how people access care, because what we know is that in having the Affordable Care Act was a way for people across the nation to get access to care. The problem is if the protections of the ACA go away, those people may be vulnerable because they just can't simply get in to a provider that will accept their insurance if they have insurance, or public insurance. We all know that while you may be insured under Medicaid, that still is not a ticket into seeing a physician, because very few physicians are actually accepting that type of insurance depending on where you are. I think the second thing that's important is that the quality of care has the potential to be compromised, because access is certainly an important component of quality, but many of the programs that have been put in place in terms of pay for performance will now not be as in the lead as they have been in the past, and that with nobody watching, that has the potential for people to not pay as much attention and measure quality to the degree it has, and I think that potentially has an adverse effect. Third, I think that there certainly are concerns around the issue of pre-existing conditions. As a cancer survivor myself, I worry. I've been cancer-free now for 20 years, but I still worry about the day when my cancer might come back, and you live with that in the background. And whether it's cancer or heart disease or lung disease or any other condition that you might have, a pre-existing condition is certainly a challenge to live with. And as the number of chronic conditions, not only what I like to call the fundamental chronic conditions like diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, while those conditions as a platform have been around for a long time, and we haven't necessarily done a great job with them, there is now, in the aftermath of COVID, an overlay of new chronic conditions. COVID has affected people's neurological systems, pulmonary systems, heart systems in a way that many, many months later, they're still not coming back. And we haven't even put those COVID-related chronic conditions into the equation as we start to think about how to provide chronic care going forward. So I think, Laura, those are a few ways in which, if the ACA is ultimately struck down, those challenges will be with people for a long time.
So given the challenges that you just mentioned, potentially dealing with more population health struggles than had already existed, if the ACA is struck down, what kind of support or resources from life sciences companies would be helpful to hospitals and to physician practices?
Yeah, I think that given how long we've been now on this journey of the Affordable Care Act, it will be, the future would be uncertain in terms of, right, for many of us and for many of my colleagues, we have organized our health systems to be oriented to serve the needs of our community and to do the best job we can around population health and assuring what we call the value proposition, the best quality of care delivered at the lowest cost. And I think if many of the principal tenets of the ACA are struck down, it raises the question about, well, do you have to continue to pursue the value proposition for those that you serve? And again, the unlike the outcomes of striking down the Affordable Care Act are aimed at both of those premises, which is quality has the potential to deteriorate and cost has the potential to go up. For those folks in the life sciences industry and who work for life sciences companies, we have realized over the last decade a constraint on the way in which we provide our products to healthcare delivery networks. And I think, um, while I don't think that the cost proposition will be a free for all, I think that there will be less constraint on the way that that goes forward. For example, I know that in our health system, we have certainly worked with our physician colleagues to streamline the inventory of important products and medications and create formularies, if you will, to do that. If the Affordable Care Act goes away and cost is no longer as tightly regulated, there may be an opportunity for life sciences companies to come in and open up those formularies with their products. I don't think it's going to be quite a free for all. I believe that there's going to be a need to make sure that you're still cost effective, you're still driving the total cost of care down. But I think it will open things up more than they have been over the last decade or so.
And I imagine it won't be a free for all either because of commercial payers, because they're still going to be employers are certainly going to be demanding, continue to demand more value from healthcare providers, correct?
I think that's a great point, right? Um, Not all payers are the same. Public payers will certainly continue to drive this, you would expect, because the federal government is the largest payer of healthcare services through its Medicare and partly through its Medicaid programs. But commercial insurers won't tolerate the increasing or runaway costs of the past. And so I think that there is, to your point, a lot that we can do to continue to constrain that, which for the life sciences company means, again, every product that you create has to add value. It has to continue, and you've got to be explicit when you're explaining what your product does, not only to doctors but to how it reduces the total cost of care in aggregate. I think that's an important piece. We don't pay attention to the unit cost. You can have a more expensive pharmacologic agent, you can have a more expensive product, but if it doesn't have to be administered as frequently or replaced as frequently, the total cost of care may go down, and that contributes to the value proposition.
So, Dr. Slonim, what kind of business acumen do you look for in a sales rep during uncertain times like these?
I think that the business acumen that's required for representatives in healthcare is that you've got to know the industry. This is not simply about knowing your product or knowing how to sell. This is about knowing the challenges and the context in which the people you're selling to are operating in. What are their priorities? How are they managing their business? Where does your product fit within the context of what they're concerned about on a day-to-day basis? I think that's the fundamentals. And so it requires uh, obviously a micro environmental understanding of what your product can do in the space of delivering care. But for representatives that I see, particularly in uncertain times, you need to also understand the macro environmental context that contributes to where your product may fit in. And is there it's like a puzzle. Does your product fit? Is it the piece that fits into the puzzle that I'm and my team are currently worried about? And I think that's important because not everybody brings that, Laura, to the table when they're trying to, you know, to share their product vision with us. There are amazing products out there, lots of good things to go on, but I count on people to share with me not only where their product makes a difference, but how it differentiates itself among the other products that are available. So you have to have that contextual piece at both the micro and the macro level to be successful.
So, Dr. Slonim, what is the best way to create credibility with you right off the bat from a distance, either during that initial invitation to meet with you or during a virtual call?
Just like the way in which we go about interviewing potential people who are going to work for us, right? You've got to have your credibility is built on your background, how you speak. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you have to be respectful. Obviously, you have to know your stuff. Obviously, you have to have a broader lens that you bring. We've talked about some of those things. And if you really want to build credibility, it's knowing a little bit more about us than you've done your homework, right? No one wants to interview a potential job candidate that hasn't done their homework on your organization and knows where their job fits in and what they might do to contribute. I want to know from a rep, what are you going to do with your product and how are you going to contribute? And if you don't understand my priorities, all priorities are not created equal, about what we're after and what it's easy to get to, it's easy to understand. I'm all over social media. People know what the priorities are for me. I'm an open book. And, they're on my website and, they're on our television commercials. And so all you need to do is spend a little time in market and you will understand those issues that we're passionate about. And using that enhances your credibility when you make a call. And that's just the reality. Not long ago, I got a contact of all things from LinkedIn, which often you can be inundated with. But I do read my LinkedIn messages. I make sure that I go through. It may not be today, maybe 2 weeks from today, because it's not prioritized. But when I get to it, it's important. And this one person who cold called me on LinkedIn sent me a message, an in-message. Apparently, we had been connected in that space before, and he sent me an in-message and said, "Hey, by the way, he was working for a company that had a new product, and just so happened he saw me making a pitch for this in some podcast or video that I did, and I called him. We had a meeting the next day. I was apologetic for the fact that it took me 2 weeks to get back to him. And the good news for him is he wasn't a pest about it. Again, going back to the other things. He reached out, he sent me a reminder, it caught my attention. I'm like, oh, wow, that's actually something we could use. The next day we had a conversation. So while we're busy, we will prioritize the things that are important to us, particularly if we think they're going to add value and make the work for our teams easier or provide care or the delivery of care, make it better for our consumers. That's all important for us, and we'll make the time to do that.
What advice do you have for directors on how they can lead their learning teams during times of uncertainty right now?
Uncertainty, Laura, is bidirectional, right? It's people are uncertain about how to go about their work if you're on the life sciences side, and there's uncertainty in knowing what the customer may need or want during these difficult times. There really is no way except to manage the uncertainty and don't let it manage you. Stay true to your product. If your product is a good one, know what niche it fills. Understand where in the context that prioritization your product is within what that health system, health delivery network is dealing with. Just because we've got COVID doesn't mean we stop taking care of people who have heart problems. Just because we've got COVID doesn't mean neurological injury has gone away. We still have those important challenges facing us. And now even more while we're busy with new challenges, sometimes you need to be there irritating the conversation, being a little bit more irritable in that you want to make sure people are hearing you. It's not just about COVID, and so your product does have a role, even though um, even though we're in fact taking our time, a lot of time with COVID.
What changes should training leaders make to their strategy for 2021?
I think it's become even more difficult for life sciences companies as many places have shut down in the context of COVID. And so as you guys are looking for ways to engage, it's not as easy. Strategically, it's not as easy. And it may require new and innovative approaches that we've not thought about before. Um, this may be heresy, but I use it as a provocative example of where we're going, right? Imagine a world where detailing may not happen the way it has over the last 30 years, where the rep is not as important to the engagement of the customer as they have been for as long as I can remember in my career. What then would the engagement look like? It wouldn't go away, it would just be different. Well, identifying the ways to engage without being in person, without and getting people's attention without being in person, with using technology like we're here using today, like figuring out how you might engage more directly if the ACA goes away. All of those elements create a strategic plan for life sciences companies about how they're going to reach their customer base. And not to overuse it, but I mean, Amazon's figured it out. Prime, right? I mean, Walgreens has figured it out. Walmart has figured it out. Other people are figuring it out. And I want to make sure that because we've had a mechanism to do it with representatives and in-person detailing and whole, that we're not losing the opportunity for innovation because it's the way we've always done it. That, I think, is really important. It may not go back to the way it was. And those companies that are going to win are who are training their representatives and that workforce to do it differently and in a way that's meaningful in a new contextual frame.
For more strategies you can use, please visit our resources page. On behalf of CMR Institute, I'd like to thank you for spending time with us today.